Hi, welcome to this part of my review featuring Heavy Gear Revitalized, the core book. This is the first edition of the tabletop role-playing game featuring sci-fi drama and mech battles. If you haven't seen the other parts of the review, please check out the playlist in the description below. This time we are going to talk about injuries.
Under heavy fire.
If an attacker hits an opponent, he does an amount of damage equal to his weapon damage multiplier times his margin of success. So it's damage equals weapon damage multiplying margin of success, as simple as that. This damage value is compared with the wounding scores of the victim. If the damage equals or surpasses any of the three scores, the effect of the highest score passed affects the victim. If an injury does damage less than the target's flesh wound threshold, the target suffers a minor injury that is somewhat painful but has no game effects. Now, there are some nuances to this. Many people in high-risk occupations such as police and military personnel wear body armor. Personal body armor is rated by its armor rating, of course. That rating is added to all three of the character's wounding scores. Shots aimed at locations that are not covered by a character's body armor are not affected by the armor rating. If a specific location is not declared, use the armor rating of the victim's torso. When it comes to action penalties, severe injuries are very painful and crippling. These effects are simulated by the action penalty associated with injuries. Each injury applies a penalty to all attribute, secondary trait, and skill tests due to pain and trauma. This includes tests to resist degeneration of wounds and avoid unconsciousness. These action penalties also affect the first aid or medicine rolls of any medic who attempts to treat the character. When it comes to flesh wounds wound is a catch-all term for painful but generally non-life-threatening injuries, such as minor gunshot wounds, deep cuts, minor concussions, and other severe flesh wounds. Multiple flesh wounds can induce shock and are thus potentially life-threatening. Each flesh wound applies a -1 action penalty. Characters with flesh wounds cannot sprint, but they can maintain a steady, if painful, jogging pace. Concerning deep wounds, these are more severe injuries than flesh wounds, of course. Compound fractures of major bones, punctured or crushed organs, damage to major blood vessels, and severe concussions are all classified as deep wounds. Deep wounds can be immediately life-threatening and are often fatal if left untreated. Deep wounds have a -2 action penalty. Characters with one deep wound can go no faster than a slow walk. Characters with more than one deep wounds are reduced to crawling and cannot stand unassisted. When it comes to knockouts, anytime a character suffers a wound, flesh or deep, he may be knocked unconscious from pain or cranial trauma. The character must pass a health test versus a threshold of 1 to avoid unconsciousness. Remember those action penalties. If the character fails the test, he will remain unconscious for 1d6 minutes per flesh wound plus 1d6 hours per deep wound. If the character fumbles the unconsciousness test, he slips into a coma. The Game Master should decide how long the coma will last based upon the character's injuries. Game Masters are advised to remember that comas are unpredictable in duration and severity. When it comes to untreated injuries, any major wound that is left untreated will, after a while, begin to fester and become infected. Untreated wounds that is not stabilized by a medic also cause additional blood loss and trauma. The effects of leaving wounds untreated is simulated by wound degeneration. Degeneration is tested daily for flesh wounds and hourly for deep wounds, independently of each other. Multiple injuries of one type cause the time between the degeneration tests to be divided by the number of injuries of the appropriate type. Degeneration tests are health tests with a threshold of 1. If the test is passed, the character's wounds do not worsen. If the test is failed, the character adds a new flesh wound to his injury list. If the test is fumbled, The character adds a new deep wound to his injury list, nasty bleeding or infection. These additional injuries can lead to the character's death. And this concludes this part of the review. In the next part we are going to talk about stabilizing injuries and healing those injuries. I really like the realism inserted into this section of the game. This is not a pulpy style of game. You do have some action-packed, perhaps even cinematic moments, but for the most part, the reality of death and injury is quite clear. Thank you for watching this part of the review, and thank you for your likes and your comments. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. And remember, it is better to roleplay and fail in character than not to roleplay and fail as a player. Once again, thank you, and see you later.